Ask the Unfaithful. As always, I am joined by someone who's smarter than me and stronger than me, but not better looking. But I'm thrilled that you're here again, James. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I don't think anybody will ever mistake that.
Ah,
I am great.
well,
Fantastic. You?
that's great. I'm doing very well, besides how cold it is here in Austin. I'm tired of the cold. I'm happy to be moving ahead into warmer weather sometime soon. With regard to hot and cold, today we're going to have a discussion about why the unfaithful are so hot and cold. What's interesting is there's been a lot of talk about why the betrayed is hot and cold. One minute they might want to save the marriage or relationship, the next minute they are packing their bags and they've reserved a U-Haul and they've got an attorney and oh my gosh, the push pull. But today we will probably throw a little bit of time and attention at what you have referred to in our previous podcast as the push and pull dynamic. But today we're spending a lot of time to help the unfaithful understand why they do what they do, but also to help the betrayed understand why the unfaithful exhibit such a push-pull dynamic so frequently. So before we get into that, why don't you give everybody a definition of what the push-pull dynamic of the unfaithful even is to begin with?
My favorite definition is modified from somebody named Traci Pedersen, who is an author. And it goes like this: a repetitive or cyclic push-pull dynamic in a relationship that is characterized by alternating patterns of drawing a partner close, pulling, and pushing them away, leading to emotional turbulence and instability. So there's the very formal definition.
Well, and I think you struck a chord when you say emotional turbulence and instability. Every betrayed sat back and went, finally, thank you for putting some verbiage to it. And maybe as an unfaithful, we can sit back and hear that verbiage and say, maybe I am being pretty turbulent. And how can I expect my betrayed to have a sense of stability when I'm in, I'm out, I'm back and forth? So I don't want to give up the goods too early, but what does it look like, this push-pull dynamic?
Why don't we start with pulling, which is that pulling towards. That can look like love bombing, which I think we're all familiar with that, doing that and what the definition is. Affection. There's affection, and then there's almost saccharine sweet kind of affection or too much, or even what we had talked about before, where the affection is more like stealing. So it's one-sided affection, right? I'm
Yeah.
going to give you a hug because I want that hug, not because I want to give you that energy.
Mm.
Sharing what's going on emotionally for them, but that doesn't have to mean that it's done from a victim standpoint. That actual vulnerability is really what a partner has always wanted. So that is a pulling behavior. So I'm not saying that these pulling behaviors are bad by any means. They can be really good. They are actually what would look like healthy connection. Giving attention to the partner, even an intensity and desire or wanting to be with their partner. So, those are all things that, yeah, you do want that in a good relationship. So it can actually pull that partner in a very beautiful and meaningful way. And I think that a lot of times we mean that. We're very genuine in showing love and talking about love. And it can just be on that intense side because we're kind of yo-yoing here.
Because when you then factor in the pushing away behaviors, it leads a betrayed to go, what is happening? It also leads an unfaithful to go, what am I doing? Why do I do this? Because I think there's these moments where we as unfaithful get self-reflective and go, I wanted to be with him or her, and now, ugh, what's happening? So what are some pushing behaviors, as in pushing away our partner?
When we withdraw, we distance or isolate. And that can even just look like sadness. It can look like sulking. It can look like a pity party, but it can look like something that just really would be thought of as a usual emotion or a regular emotion. So that sadness or just being off. negative moods, those sorts of things. It can look like being there or present, but disconnected. That could be being circumspect or aloof, and it can look like hostility. So
Yeah.
anger, really pushing away. And that usually will result from almost pulling too hard and being too vulnerable. And by too vulnerable, I mean that you're uncomfortable with, like, oh man, I said too much, or I was too revealing about who I am. And whoa, no, we got to push away now. And that's a reactive thing. It isn't like, let me see how I can mess with my partner thing.
And this is a good point for the unfaithful right now to understand, how does this affect my betrayed partner? And this is a great moment for the betrayed partner to kind of feel like, okay, let's see how good James and Sam are to be able to identify, because you've done a pretty phenomenal job. If you guys haven't noticed, I get the notes beforehand. So this is, I think, a really key moment to really honor the betrayed, but educate the unfaithful on how this hurts them.
I do want to say this isn't an exhaustive list. And
Right.
partners are going to be able to listen to this and go, well, yeah, and there's this and there's that and there's this and there's that. And I think that's important that that gets conveyed in a place where an unfaithful can hear it. And I think these are some really significant ones. So this kind of push pull can leave a partner feeling abandoned, rejected, which are not the same thing, but they're close, unsure, and stemming out of unsure, anxious. Well, if you're uncertain, it's pretty human to feel anxious, confusion. And if I add to that, doubt, and that doubt would be about, well, is my partner really committed here? What are his or her intentions moving forward? Angry and exhausted, emotionally exhausted, which actually will lead to physical exhaustion too. So those are six things in there that I think are pretty significant. As I said, you can add to them.
All day long, and with great respect for the betrayed, it is incredibly painful to be on the other end of the push and pull, because unfortunately, and this is a harsh but true statement, wouldn't you agree that it perpetuates the feeling of betrayal to the betrayed?
Yeah, actually, I'd say that it's indistinguishable for the betrayed from the
Oh,
betrayal.
wow.
Uh,
Really?
Yeah, because what happens is that those are the feelings that will come up in betrayal. And then when they're felt again, it's going to trigger that trauma spiral immediately and the reactions that can come out of that. The brain doesn't know from yesterday, 10 years ago, today, right? It just takes it as happening right now. And so what it's doing is it's re-traumatizing or beginning that trauma over again. Unfortunately, that's the way the brain works. And so perpetuating those feelings is absolutely the right wording to use. It just keeps it going and keeps it going. And I know as unfaithfuls, we're working really hard in recovery to not do that. So it's really helpful to be aware of what our push pull stuff does.
And I know you feel this way, but we spend a lot of time, I know I do, spend a lot of time helping the unfaithful understand the reaction of the betrayed. So anytime the betrayed has that point in their brain or their nervous system where it feels like betrayal happening all over again, you're going to see that type of reaction in their body. You're going to feel it, not because you're actually betraying them per se, but it's tapping into those feelings. And why would it not tap into those feelings, right?
Yeah, and part of the hard thing with for unfaithfuls here is that this is stuff that can just happen without being conscious of it. In
Yeah.
fact, it's usually unconscious, and so we have to therefore become aware of when we're doing it. And I love that you brought up body language because what you'll see in a betrayed is sometimes they'll slump over, almost, I'm going to turn to the side here, but almost a curving down, and that's a protective response. And they might bow up in a protective mode. And of course, they may walk away or have a rageful trauma reaction as well, which is going to be more than their body language. But I love that you brought that up because that is kind of the first clue that you'll get. Is there a wince? Do they wince a little bit? What's their face doing? You got to be aware of that because that's going to help you see what the effect of what just happened did. And then that will clue me into, oh, I better take a look at what just happened. What did I just do? Because if you're unconscious of it, that's one way to be aware.
You're absolutely right. So who does it? Do we both do it? I kind of teed this up earlier, but don't we both do this in the recovery process?
Sure. We both do it actually in any relationship out there, whether there's been betrayal or not, this happens as long as there's at least one person doing the push pull. But yes, it can be both for different reasons. The unfaithful, because it's been there for a long time. It might
Yeah.
be an entire life pattern. It might be something that they developed in prior relationships. A lot of times it's developed much earlier on than that. In any event, it likely started before this particular relationship started. And certainly since the acting out started, because we can't live with that internal conflict, so we create the external conflict, the push pull. Now, the betrayed, because of the betrayal itself. I'm not
Yeah.
saying there couldn't be something that existed before the betrayal, but absolutely because of the betrayal itself.
Now, we know that both of them do it.
Mhm.
There's been a whole lot more information out there on why the betrayed push and pull, but there hasn't been a ton of info on why the unfaithful push and pull. So let's talk about why do we unfaithful do this?
Primarily to protect ourselves from possible, and I want to say that's important, that word, not certain emotional pain. We react as mammals to pain. If you think physical pain, you can imagine we try to avoid it. We try to get rid of it very quickly. Emotional pain actually hits us in the same kind of way. So we're always trying to avoid the emotional pain. It's like nobody puts their hands in a door and say slam it. And it's the same thing emotionally. Nobody wants to have somebody angry at them, to feel shame. Most people don't want to feel the negative emotions. Positive emotions usually are pretty well accepted. But that's really it. It's protecting ourselves from possible emotional pain. That's really important to remember, that it's possible, not certain.
And why do the unfaithful do it as opposed to maybe the reasons that the betrayed do it?
So I'm going to ask you a question. Were you good at intimacy before you were discovered and had to do your work?
Well, on the surface level, yes, but that's how unsmart I was because that wasn't real intimacy.
Right, right. So intimacy, into me, you see, meaning we're really connected. What we have is this doubt that we're capable of doing it, especially to the level that our partners are able to seemingly do it. Okay, so yes, they are able to do it. We are not, for many reasons. Maybe we never learned it. Most likely, we never learned how, or maybe we don't want to go there because we got hurt at some point in our lives when we did. So we never really developed that capability where we're really comfortable with it, not knowing what it really is or what it actually looks and feels like. And then also the fears of abandonment and rejection if we're vulnerable. So again, that comes from some sort of experience at some point, could be more recent, could be past, that causes us to be fearful of showing who we are, showing ourselves with all of our fears, perceived weaknesses, and so on. It can also come from uncertainty around being committed to the relationship or to any relationship, really, and feeling like our betrayed's needs and wants are more than we're capable of giving. I just don't know how to meet her or his needs and desires. Don't know how to do it. So notice in all of that, it's about the capability. I don't feel capable. Uh, we learn things all the time and become capable at them. So there's actually hope in this.
Right.
So I believe you and I did it. Or I'm going to say I'm still a work in progress. I know you're perfect and all that, but
Oh Lord. Oh gosh, please, please stop before the email come rushing in with all of my failures. But I was talking to a gentleman today who's a client, but he's a friend and like a brother to me. And I said, look, I got one challenge for you. The only challenge I have for you right now in 2025 is being intentional.
Mhm.
If you can be intentional, it will help you. And what you're talking about, not to oversimplify it, but like you said, being intentional in learning how to lean in, right? Learning how to build our self concept, learning how to lean into this stuff, not just avoiding it and just pulling back, right? This is why expert help comes in: retreats, videos, podcasts, getting an expert coach or therapist, intensives, because you may not have the skills, but if you have the want to, that's kind of half the battle, no?
Oh, without a doubt. So what we're kind of trying to do here, and hopefully this doesn't get to social scientist kind of thing, but we're trying to create a healthy self-attachment, a healthy attachment to who we are, right? If you want to,
Absolutely.
if anybody out there really wants to see, Sharon and I did a study, still are doing it, but like over the last 5 years in core. You can go to, I think it's at Core Relationship Recovery, and we've got a YouTube on that study. That helps explain it more in depth if you really want that. But basically, we're just trying to become secure in our attachment with ourselves, which means then the more we're able to do that, the more we can attach securely to other people in our lives. If you think about who is our primary love relationship, that's our partner. So by working on that self attachment, we also work, therefore, on making our attachment with our partner more secure, because part of the problem here for unfaithfuls is because we're living from an anxious or avoidant attachment style. So that would be preoccupied is the anxious, or fearful, which is fearful avoidant style. Just to briefly cover that, in a preoccupied or anxious, the pull is going to be because we need reassurance and validation from being close. The push would be, oh, wow, if they know all about me, if they know everything that I am, they won't want me. And then the fearful avoidant, the pull is craving the closeness and intimacy, but the push is the fear of judgment when we actually do the pulling. And so we back off to feel safe. Then we have feeling like we don't have enough control in our lives. We could call that insufficient self empowerment. What that does when we don't have enough of that is it creates this need to have control, and we tend to do that outside of ourselves. So we're trying to control situations, we're trying to control outcomes, even how another person reacts or doesn't react. And that gives us a feeling like we have control over our own lives, but it doesn't work well because we can't control situations or outcomes, and nobody else likes to be controlled. So it's usually going to backfire. And that comes from a very unconscious place. So we've got to make that conscious. We question ourselves, how can we empower ourselves here? Usually that's by sharing who we are and seeing that, oh, that's going to be handled well. I'm going to be safe in doing that. That creates a feeling of, oh, I can be okay being me. That's that secure attachment. And it also gives us this feeling of, okay, phew, I have control over my life.
Another one, wouldn't you agree, is just unresolved issues. I mean, we are trying to DIY it, we're trying to wing it, we're trying to grit it. Like if I just try harder, and oftentimes I kind of have moments where I'll say, I don't think trying harder per se is the answer. How about trying smarter? Because until we resolve maybe some childhood wounding, until we resolve the fact that we don't understand why we do what we do, aren't we just kind of a prisoner to this oversimplified stuck, this feeling of stuck because we have all these unresolved issues?
Yeah, it really comes down to that, or, hey, I've tried to change these behaviors. I've tried to act closer and do all these things, and yet it hasn't worked. Why hasn't it worked? Because there's something deeper. Now,
Right.
we get some thumbs downs about talking about
No,
childhood
we don't.
stuff.
Nope, never. Yeah, we do get some
But
people who don't
it
like
upsets
that.
people. But I think it upsets people because that seems like just impossible work. I can tell you it's not impossible work, but it's not just your childhood stuff. It's any past experiences lead us to try to defend ourselves or stay safe because they leave scars. If something hurts, just like if you cut your hand, that's going to leave a scar. Well, emotional stuff leaves scars as well. And that creates, okay, I don't want that again. So we create, maybe we withdraw, maybe we just don't go into those situations again. So those are kind of survival beliefs and behaviors, and they get in the way of being able to relate fully.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So we need to be able to go back. Look, just take a look at it so that we can actually say, okay, that might be driving that behavior. I can look at that belief. What is it? My belief or my negative or survival belief and behaviors. What are those? If I can identify those, I can work to change those. I can work to have a new belief and then therefore new behaviors. So it doesn't have to be, okay, I've got to go all Freudian. We've got one more on some of the problems that contribute to this push-pull, and that would be difficulty communicating emotions, needs, and wants clearly. Not being able to do it clearly leads to that confusion and doubt. So that's something, it takes a risk, though, communicating clearly. So it takes some courage to do that.
And at the end of the day, there comes a point. I remember I was saying this to a client last week. I said, it feels like we have a need for you to elevate your vocabulary to communicate because you're speaking oversimplified caveman and you're in this dynamic. Your wife wants, instead of you just getting mad or getting angry or getting defensive, how about we elevate our vocabulary? How about we learn how to communicate, learn how to validate? Why don't we use what a great buddy of mine says, AVR, acknowledge, validate, reassure? How about using some tools rather than just trying to suck it up? So, those that are listening and watching as unfaithful. Now, watch this. So, in a few moments, talk a little bit about why the betrayed will do the push and pull. Why do they resort to that behavior?
Primarily because the betrayal is actually an intimate attachment abruption. I love the word abruption for that because it's just a tearing apart. That will cause a fear of intimacy because, oh boy, if I even attempt to be intimate now, and by intimate I mean connected, it's almost certainly going to bring pain. Um, that loss of trust in the unfaithful is also a loss of trust in love and intimacy itself. And then a need for control, like I talked about with the unfaithful, because the betrayal takes all a betrayed's power away, even their internal power, their internal feeling like they have control over their life at all, and that any decision they make is going to be the right one for them. They can't trust their intuition even anymore, even though I'm here to tell you you can, but I can tell you that all day long until you regain it for yourself as far as betrayeds. So that need for some sort of control can absolutely, just like the first two, get in the way and become a push pull.
Because they have to learn, unfaithful, listen carefully. The betrayed have to learn to trust themselves again as well as the unfaithful, and trust themselves because the betrayed oftentimes have this shame that they should have seen it coming, they should have known more, they should have handled it better, if only. And this is all part of the grief of being a betrayed, right?
It is. And here's the thing that an unfaithful can take from that is earlier on, we talked about the feelings a betrayed may feel. The more you familiarize yourself with betrayal trauma and the effects it has, the more you can lovingly attend to your betrayed and also be able to be present when they are in their trauma spiral, which is going to
Now,
have,
hold on. You just said something that I want to highlight. I
okay,
know all the betrayed are clapping, male or female, but unfaithful. Listen to this. Listen to the verbiage that my great hero and brother said. Lovingly attend. Until an unfaithful can lovingly attend to their betrayed, there remains major work to be done, right?
yeah, it's key.
Oh, it's beautiful verbiage, James. It's such a picture of learning how to keep in mind what we've done, what we've put our betrayed through, right?
And here's the funny thing, when we lovingly attend, it actually removes the shame we feel for having done it. Doesn't remove the guilt, which is
No,
important
not at all.
because the guilt is healthy. Keeps us from doing that again. Keeps our eye on the prize, which the prize is to keep our partner in an even space and treat them with that loving consideration and respect. So, given that you want this relationship and you want it to work, you really want something brand new, which is the two of you creating something new. That loving attendance actually removes the shame, and the shame is a block. As Sharon likes to say, shame is very singular. It's a singular experience, can't be shared. So when we can be lovingly attentive, we are connecting, and when we connect, we're removing shame.
So I really don't appreciate the fact that in these sessions where we have all of these people watching us, that you drop these new bits of information on me and you don't do it privately. So I just got to take a little note here about shame being an individual block. So I'll correct you later for not giving me that. I feel like I get access to you that the general public doesn't because you are brilliant. But no, I love that. It's such a true statement of an individual block. Okay, as we move into this and we're starting to land the plane, how did the unfaithful change this dynamic? How do they start to? I just kind of rode them a little bit with the want to and being intentional. But okay, the want to is half of it. How do they do it on a practical level?
Part of it is a mindset. You have to keep in mind that our perceptions and fears are always biased by the filters that we process them through. That's a complicated way to say that emotional pain is possible, not certain. So bear that in mind. Possible is very different from certain. So you will be able to get through this. Even if you do feel emotional pain, you'll make it through it. That's just something to keep in mind as you do these more practical things that we're talking about. The first thing I'll talk about is practicing healthy and open communication. So we've kind of outlined that really extensively in a couple of previous episodes. In fact, number
Right.
28 and 29, where we talk about four really stinky communication styles and one really good one. Those are worth watching because it's going to tell you exactly what to stay away from and exactly what to embrace. A second piece would be seeking, so I'm saying seeking, but being proactive about seeking an understanding of each other's and our own behaviors. Why do I do that? Why does my partner do that? We have to figure out what do we both do, right? And then we have to ask this question, why might they do that? Why might they be doing that? When you've looked at your own stuff, then a discussion with your partner might be prove really productive about that. Look at why you do it, why you do what you do. And that discussion actually is really big because being open, being willing to discuss what you've discovered about yourself starts the change from the push pull to a much more balanced relating. Use active listening. We've talked about that a bunch of times, but that's where you listen and you ask questions. To put it a little too simply, but that's sufficient. Stay curious, not judgmental. So when you feel a judgment, but coming in, pull yourself back from that and just stay curious because if it's running through your filters, then judgment and defense are going to come in. And that's a really good clue as to everything being run through your filters. So you want to listen with that open, curious mind. You got to be careful how you say something because guess what? Your partner may have filters too around which they may be sensitive and that could possibly trigger them. And right now, you're really wanting to stay in this healthy communication and discussion. So you want to try not to do the triggering part, right? You want to avoid triggering.
Would you agree it's also about practicing what we would call the basics of healing? Typical honesty, reliability, accountability, predictability, transparency, being able to have patience with the process. I mean, would you agree that those are all healthy metrics to use? Because all of that's essential. And then, but I mean, this term's been overused, but we can talk about it super quickly, having boundaries as well, right?
Yes. We're going to do a whole podcast on boundaries, going both ways on that. Those healthy boundaries that build a balanced, healthy relationship. All of these are really important. I think the thing you said about patience with change, it takes time and it takes practice for both partners here. And
Yeah,
unfaithful is what I want you to get from that is this is not permission to stop, right? It is to say it's going to take some time. You're going to falter. Give yourself that grace to learn this. Keep pushing to learn it and give yourself the grace when you don't do a great job with it. Plus, of course, the usual make amends, be present, all of those things when you do trip up, and keep working to get better at it. Change can be scary. This patience piece is also where knowing and understanding as best you can what your partner is struggling with is vital. Just don't use any of this as an excuse to press pause when it gets hard. You did bring up boundaries, man. We are going to do another podcast on that, but let's talk about some boundaries surrounding this push pull piece. They have to be established as a couple. You got to collaborate on that. These are not boundaries that are surrounding the betrayal and acting out. Those boundaries need to have been set already by your partner and relate to you. These are relating to those, but they are in addition to. So that's really important. They got to promote emotional safety, trust, respect, and they've got to be communicated and mutually enforced with gentle reminders as necessary. In our holiday one that we did, I talked about, hey, having a fail-safe word or a word that says help, right? You can establish those in your gentle reminders so that nobody goes into any kind of a trauma spiral and things can stay really steady. Let's issue a warning, shall we? Do not weaponize those boundaries. Either party can do that. It's a disruptive and disconnective thing to do. It can be very tempting sometimes. You said you would do this. We agreed on that. Okay, it's true. Wait until there's a calm moment and say, hey, this is what we agreed on, and I'd like to return to that. However, that has
yeah.
to be done, but don't weaponize it. There's a last piece here that is maybe one of the most vital pieces of all of this change, and that is revel in the wins and gains together. This is, hey, this is really working for us. We handled that differently. I
Look
noticed
at
it's
us.
not a, hey, way to go, you did a good job, or your recovery's going great. I'm not talking about that. This is wins and gains about getting more balance in the relationship with less push pull, expressing gratitude for each other's relational work is really helpful. I really love that has really helped me feel safe. That's really fantastic that that's happening for us now. I think that's really, really important to celebrate those wins and gains.
Part of it is, I'm sure some unfaithful and some betrayed may be going, you mean we actually can get some wins and gains? You absolutely can. If you have two parties who want to, if you have breath in your lungs, you've spent this amount of time with us, so you obviously have some form of want to. And yes, it is absolutely possible for wins and gains. It is possible to heal, but it's not possible if you're checking boxes or just expecting people to be grateful that you're showing up. It's going to come by hard work, dedication, and everything that we've talked about today. If we can help, you can reach out to us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. We'd love for you to subscribe. We'd love for you to like this episode. If we can help in any way, we're here for you to make suggestions. And James, for those that are trying to wrap their mind around this dynamic and want to read more about that piece on your website that you recommended, one more time, how can they find that one piece that you suggested?
Okay, so go to YouTube and put in the little @ core relationship recovery. And that should take you to our YouTube channel, which has a lot of stuff on it that you might find helpful too. But the last entry is talking about the secure self-attachment piece. And it explains attachment all around as well, which is kind of helpful.
As we say goodbye today, James, as always, you were fantastic. I'm honored to be a part of your life and your recovery. We are honored that you joined us today. We'll see you next time on Ask the Unfaithful.